Hi, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. We're excited to be with you today as we discuss some of the things that Bern has found to be very useful in his life. Bern, I understand that you are considered to be the only non-academic praxeologist. What is a praxeologist?
Let me slip something in there too. It's the only living non-academic praxeologist in the world.
Well, that's important.
There's members of the academic community, especially those at SMU, Southern Methodist University, back in 1984, after seeing some of my work, gave me that title. It's non-academic in the sense that I do not have a degree in what we discuss. Praxeology actually is a study of human behavior, a deliberate study of human behavior, but on the street level. In other words, I went into the world totally unprepared and had two very difficult, over-challenged years when I first entered the business community. And during that time, I recognized how unprepared I was, and no matter how many questions I asked or how many books I read, there didn't seem to be the, quote, breakthrough. And so when that finally did come, and success came my way, I dedicated myself to studying and trying to figure out what we haven't heard, what we've missed. And as a result, there's been a deliberate confronting life, pressing the envelope, testing myself, and frankly, thousands of other people in a very volatile environment. And so now it's not proctologist. For the senior male viewer that we might have, it's not proctologist, it's praxeologist. And it comes from the Greek word praxis, P-R-A-X-I-S, and that means from the street. Okay.
Does that mean that you actually gone out and lived on the street?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been real close a few times. It's really interesting. Since 1955, I have confronted it all. I have walked away from situations where I was making $250,000 a year, started over and had difficulty making $10,000 in a year. And my family had to endure this, and bless their hearts, they did for a long, long time. There's a little message in that somewhere. But yeah, it's the idea of what is this really all about? And the main thing is always being on purpose, always kind of saying, okay, and what it really boils down to is an anxiety, a desire to find information that would make life a little easier than it was for me when I got started. And gee, I guess since the half-century mark, where it really began to come together, to collate, to integrate into some real practical, sound information. And so I started doing what I do professionally in 1972, and it's called a praxeology. Now, it's very mainstream, doesn't conflict with the religion nor the metaphysicians. It was very, very mainstream, and hopefully it'll bring some of those people back into something that really works. I am confident of one thing. In praxeology, it's that middle-of-the-road, mainstream, and yet unidentified data that seems somehow to make an immediate difference in who we're becoming. I have a lot of confidence that in the essays that I do, that everything I talk about absolutely works if you work it. There's no theory. See, now, praxeology is the opposite of theory. It's very mainstream, down to earth.
Now, you use the words data and mainstream and information. Does that mean that in your experience you've done a lot of research, actually discussed or interviewed people, or how have you gathered this information?
In every imaginable way. First of all, we have a number of research papers that we've done. One I call a socioeconomic review. One is an entertainment analysis. One is a job relationship analysis. And altogether, we've probably interviewed in excess of 20,000 people. That's door-to-door, store-to-store, on the street, asking them a whole variety of questions. And 20,000 interviews is beyond the norm.
Oh, yes.
A lot of research is done with 1,200 interviews, and then they permute up and give us an accurate estimate of the way this is within 2 to 3%. You've heard that?
Yes.
Well, the fact of the matter is that when you do enough interviews, there seems to be a story on the other side. We have recognized things out of the research we never would have come across if we hadn't talked to the extreme numbers. You know what I'm saying?
Truth is stranger than fiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then, to couple that, I've chosen a very volatile environment as a lifratory. I call it a lifratory. And that's the creative direct sales environment. In other words, since 1955, I've been attracting people out of the job market into the free enterprise system as creative direct salespeople. Now, a lot of people are going to say, "Uh-oh, a salesman, luck out," you know. But my experience is that it's probably one of the noble environments that's out here. People come into this experience and they want to be ethical, they want to do it right, they want to offer a good and proper service, they want it to be supported by the company. And so it's an incredible environment to test people.
That's interesting. I've never heard a salesman called noble before.
Oh, gee. You know, if you really get in and around these people, there's a lot of things that goes on in the sales industry that people aren't conscious of. There's less divorces per capita within the environment. There's less suicides. There's more, like today, this morning, I had an interview with a group of about, a dozen salespeople. And we have a feelings list that we examine how they feel at the moment.
Yes.
And it's my experience that in a sales environment, there's an overabundance of love. Always is. It's a common denominator. It's really fascinating.
Really?
Much more so than a lot of the other professions and the industries.
Now, is that because of the kind of people that go into sales, or is that because being in that environment creates that kind of
I
individual?
think if they're reasonably successful, if they're moving forward with their career, that unconsciously, sometimes consciously, hopefully consciously, but sometimes unconsciously become more and more adoptive. In other words, they've recognized that in order to endure, in order to thrive, they have to embrace people, they have to serve people, and as a result, this love seems to develop in them. There's a patience there oftentimes that you don't find in the average person, and it might seem like I'm overselling it, but it's not uncommon. Not uncommon at all.
Well, so does that mean that this show is going to be mostly discussing what it means to be a salesman, or how to be more effective in sales as a career, or?
Good question. Let me be candid with you.
Okay.
In the beginning, years and years ago, about 38 years ago, my intention was to develop material that would indeed make it easier for salespeople to thrive. No question. However, over the years, it became apparent that the very qualities that create great salespeople create great neighbors, great spouses, great parents, great children, you know what I mean? Great community members. Follow what I'm saying? In other words, it's who that person is that goes into the marketplace that makes the difference.
It's not
and
what
it's
they're
who
selling.
that person is that we marry, and who that person is that we are in order to maintain ourselves in this society. And so, yes, it's about personal growth, personal development, awareness, the need to know that it can be better. And it's been an exciting adventure in that respect.
Really? So, you mentioned that there are certain characteristics that make you a good salesman, a good neighbor, a good spouse, a good parent. Have you identified specific characteristics then in your research?
Oh, there's a list. Patience would be one. This is not a natural state. You know, patience is a volitional commitment to not be impatient. You know what I mean? In other words, you have to really work at that because there's times when that's challenged. When people stand you up, they're running late, they don't do what they're supposed to do. That's right. And so patience, kindness, sincerity, courtesy, humility, that's not taking yourself too seriously, guilelessness, that's communicating and being there without a psychic secret, or, you know, without the guile that can come into a relationship. It involves selflessness. There's the capacity to get outside of ourselves for the sake of something or someone else. That's an exciting place to be.
Yes.
Generosity, not just with our assets and our fortune, but with our time and our attention. Those kinds of things are qualities that you'll find in great salespeople. And now the neophyte, the novice, the amateur that sometimes offends us, is out of survival. In other words, they're new in the industry, they haven't been conditioned, they haven't been coached, and so they're doing the best they can, and oftentimes that's not sufficient.
Well, I was going to say, if you say used car salesman to someone, the last thing they're going to say is generous, without guile, compassionate, selfless.
I've known some, however, those who endure, those who excel in the industry, indeed develop those characteristics. It's the turnover, the people who come and go, who grasp at the opportunity, who are recruited thinking that perhaps we have a salesperson here, and it turns out just to be a person.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm saying here is that what's happening out here in the world, that what we're exposed to in the selling industry oftentimes are neophytes and amateurs. In other words, there are people who grasp at a selling job in order to make a living until they can find something better. You know what I mean? That goes on sometimes. That's what
Right.
happened to me. That's what happened to me years ago. However, a few get in, learn, grow, develop, and become astounding citizens. At the same time, some of them don't. And so in that failure process, they become inappropriate. And that's the reputation that you know how it is. I mean, one bad apple in the barrel, and the whole barrel is suspect.
Right.
And it's really kind of unkind. But hey, we get used to it. That's the way it is. But at the same time, there's no question, I have a mission to re-identify that personality that exceeds in selling and excels. And that's what we're going to be working toward. But you know, I'm delighted the fact that all this material rolled right over into the rest of the community. And so most of the material that we have is pretty universal. And it encompasses just about everybody.
Well, you've certainly raised some very interesting points and used words that I think are in people's hearts and in their minds. And if they were to look in the mirror and say, this is the kind of person I want to be, or I would like my children to become, or who I want to marry, that's definitely words that they would use to describe that ideal person. So you're saying that the research you've done will help us to understand how to become those?
Because out of the research, you begin to identify the misdirection, the disinformation that we've suffered. You know, I've heard the motivational gurus oftentimes say that you and I are exactly where we want to be, whether we'll admit that or not. I don't know if you ever heard that philosophy.
I've heard that, and I think I am not. I am not where I want to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's what that is so unkind. I don't know why they tell us that, because I've known a lot of these people, and that's not where they wanted to be.
No.
Now, it's sure the choices they've made based on the information they had. And my difficulty is that there's a lot of disinformation. I don't know where that comes from. I just have no idea. There's a lot of conventional wisdom out here that has to be challenged because of the one thing that we talked about last week. Once again, we're 6,000 years old as a cognitive community. That means we have an intellect.
Right.
And we can reason and remember and make choices and decisions. And yet, in spite of all that authority, too few of us are really successful and happy. I mean, when you figure that only 3% of our population becomes financially independent in a society where everybody could. Now, there are those who say, oh, no, that's not true. Oh, yes, it is. This is a free enterprise system, and everybody could. Now, why don't they? Well, they've been misled. They've been given disinformation. They haven't got the proper tools. I know I didn't. Boy, I had no idea how I made it the first 2 years in selling. No idea. Totally unequipped. And but I made it through. I kept studying and reading and began to realize, whoa, you know, a lot of this stuff they're telling me just isn't working very well. I mean, there's a lot of rules out here. A lot of rules.
It seems like we're always breaking them.
Yeah, because we don't have the tools. You know, it's kind of like, you know, if you know football, for example, it's easy to know the rules. In other words, if you cross the goal line with the football, you get 6 points. If you kick out the extra point, you get 1. If you run out of bounds while the ball is put back in play at that spot, you get 10 yards on 4 downs. You get 4 more chances to get 10 more yards. If you clip somebody from behind, you lose 10 yards. I mean, those are the rules. But if you don't have the tools, you're not going to win the game. What are the tools? Size, speed, power, you know, a certain level of intellect, no question. And if you're lacking in any one of those, you're not going to win the game. And what I'm saying is that for the most part, our society has not been given all the tools that are available to work with. There's no question about that in my mind. And when you provide people with tools, you see breakthroughs. You see people moving forward with their career and their relationships, and it's an exciting process, I'm very optimistic, by the way, about our future. Very optimistic. There's parenting going on that has never occurred in our history. You know, there are philosophies developing that are so fresh and new. There's just a lot of good things happening.
So even though we're 6,000 years old as a cognitive society, you feel like maybe over the next 100 or 500 or 1,000 years we can make up for the past?
Oh yeah, because you see, because we are cognitive, we can make dramatic adjustments very quickly if we have the right information. And see, I've been kind of haughty, if you would, about the survival of the fittest. That should not apply to the human community. I mean, survival of the fittest is okay for tigers and lions and elephants and cockroaches, you know. But see, we're of a different breed. There's no question. We've got a capacity that makes us supranatural. Not super now, but supranatural. In the fact that we have a volitional capacity to make choices. And we've been given the authority to do that by a creator or by nature or by circumstance. However the audience perceives that, there's no question we have a lot of authority. It's just that it's been diminished, by parents and peers and siblings and bosses and conditions. And so the idea is to get that back and use it appropriately, authoritatively in favor of someone else. Now, I need you to be as good as you can be, and you need me to be as good as I can be. Isn't that true? And if we're better and better and better, the world gets better and better and better. If it's just the two of us. But if we can include George and Harry and Pete and Mary and Diane and Jeff and Jackie, and say, come on.
Now, do you think that's really possible? I mean, come on, Bern.
Yes.
There was how many wars are there on the planet right now? I mean, I can't look at the headlines without just being incredibly discouraged.
I understood 113 wars. Too many.
Too many. One is too many. And people talk about it. And we see the things that are happening every day. And I don't know, frankly, sometimes I get really discouraged. And I wonder if we're just going to end up not here.
Hold on. Yeah, it will be okay. Highly adaptive entities. They say the cockroach is the most adaptive entity on the planet. It's been existing forever and probably will go through everything. Rats are high on the scale too, but so are we. Highly adaptive. And the fact is that we have an advantage. And you know what it is sometimes? Can you see this? That as this gets better, this seems worse.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you look back at human history and what man has done to man, in the past, is nothing. What's going on now is nothing compared to what it used to be, is what I meant to say. It used to be horrible what people would do to one another, and now we're definitely progressing, but it's just that there's an elevation here that makes this seem difficult. Follow what I'm saying? It's all relative. Love will overcome fear, and intelligence will overcome ignorance. There's no question. And industriousness will always overcome indolence. We're heading in the right direction. Yes, we have a right to be optimistic. There are children out here now being nurtured in a way that you or I never were. I'll bet you that, and this is not denigrating anybody, but you're probably working in a different way at being a mom than your mom did, aren't you? Okay? I know my children are. And I can't imagine the kind of parents those children will be. And certainly a lot more effective, more potent than my daddy was. No question about that. You know what I'm saying? It's getting better, and we're going to be okay.
Now, that's encouraging for me. And I know that there's a great interest in people, and we try to read all the material that we can, and there is a great deal of love that comes along with that. And does that tie back to what you're saying about being selfless? I know that for me, being a parent has just truly changed my perspective.
It's fascinating that poets, philosophers, theologians for centuries have been saying not until we get outside of ourselves do we find out who we really are. It's selflessness seems to be the highest form of selfishness because it's the selfless people who are getting what the selfish people want. See, what is that bottom line? Not money, but peace of mind and esteem. See, if we can somehow glean our ration of peace of mind and esteem, then everything gets better. And the selfless people who have that in abundance. Now, selflessness puts us into a love mode, obviously. And this is where our power is and our blessings are. There's no question. Now, love, we have to examine that sometime in the future because it deserves a whole show, if not a whole series.
Well, Bern, this is very fascinating to me. And you said something to me before the show that I found to be very interesting. You mentioned that as a child, you were a stutterer.
Oh, well, yeah. And as an adult, and I still have my days. I still have days on the phone, or if I get stopped by a policeman or something, where I get centered on myself and I just revert all the way back. But yeah, I guess around 5 or 6 I started stuttering, and of course I was punished for stuttering and sent to bed without dinner because I stuttered.
Now that's talking how maybe parents would do something differently today.
Well, they were doing their best, and I loved them dearly, and they loved me, but they were trying to stop this terrible impediment. Well, of course, that increased the stress, and it increased the tendency to do that, and I got to the point where I just could hardly talk. I couldn't say my name, couldn't see the name of the products that I sold and represented. I remember in high school running for student government, I had to write speeches and have someone else deliver them.
Really?
And yet we were able to move forward through that. But a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of rage that came out of being teased and mimicked and mocked. Oh yeah, it was a painful process. However, let me tell you, going through the process, something inside kind of compelled me to examine, to wonder, to examine, and I found out some delightful things. The biblical Moses was a stutterer. Did you know that?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
Terrible speech impediment. Every time God asked him to do something, he'd beg off. You know, he lacked what we now call self-confidence and self-esteem. We have to address both of those issues sometime. And yet, he was provided with a tool, okay? A staff, some assistance, a support system, a brother, you know? And here we are talking about him thousands of years later, okay? Because he became a leader. Demosthenes, the greatest orator in the history of the world, was a stutterer. He was the young man that when he was, I believe, 16 or 17, was relieved of his parents' estate when they died. They wouldn't let him have property because in the Grecian days, if you were a stutterer, you were considered mentally retarded and you couldn't own property. And he was the young man who went to the seashore, put pebbles in his mouth and practiced, speaking into the roar of the wind and wave, watching his face in placid pools, using them as a mirror to determine how the muscles worked when he stuttered and when he didn't in order to master that. And out of the practice process became the greatest speaker that's ever lived. And that's quite a reputation.
Oh, yes.
So here we have tools given to Moses and the practice process by Demosthenes. And then we have Winston Churchill was a stutterer. He was sent home from school as a young man as being addled, which means unteachable and unmanageable. But he was a man of commitment. And we talk a lot about commitments and what they can do with our lives. And then Horatio Alger, the writer of the great American success story, was a stutterer. Died poor, alone, and afraid probably. But he could write. He could write. James Earl Jones, the great American black actor, was a stutterer. He found his voice in poetry. Johnny Carson was a stutterer, stuttered on vowels instead of consonants. Oh. Interesting. If you listen to him, it takes one to know one, of course. But you know, you hear enough and about. He'd slide and slip into words and what have you. And one of the great communicators of modern time. There's many, many of them like that. One thing we found, too, though, there was 2 times when stutterers don't stutter.
Really?
One of them is when they sing, okay? And what do you suppose the other one is?
I have no idea.
Huh? When they're making love. No, let me expand on that. We're going to get misunderstood here. Now, when they sing, like Mel Tiller sings and built a great career. And making love is getting outside of ourselves in contribution, in selflessness. And when I get out there, when I'm communicating to and with an audience, I never make a mistake. It just works that way.
You're in love with that audience.
Yeah, I don't sing very well, but I can sure make love. You know what I mean? And that's how I survive. Another interesting thing in order to get through the process is developing a language. I know years ago I would formulate sentences in my mind, recognize what I couldn't say, and then very quickly reformulate sentences using words that I knew I could slip through with, and therefore developing a certain lyrical style. I've had people say out of my essays, for example, one of the reasons we call them concerts is that a lot of people with a musical background will come and say, do you realize you speak beats to a measure? And I say, no. And they say, well, you do. It's like a talk sing, and I'm not even conscious of it, but it's the way I survive. And so through practice, affirmations. I can't tell you how many times I've said in my life I speak clearly and crisply without hesitation or impediment in order to condition my mind that it's okay to do that. You know what I mean? It's a matter of what is some people have called self-talk, I call conscious talk. And all of these are subjects that we'll be getting into in a lot of depth in the future weeks. So we'll have a good time with some of this. Is there...
Well, you had mentioned Moses, and that made me think of your name, Bern. Now, be honest with me. Is Bern Moses your real name?
Yeah, well, in concert, I usually carry my birth certificate with me. That comes up a lot. I understand why. You know, the name, the logo, and the material, and the look, and what have you. But yeah, I was born Bernard Sidney Moses, 1929. October 21st, by the way. October 21st, I accept gifts, money. Yeah. But no, that's the real name. And whether it influenced what I do, I don't know. I've thought about that. I've been challenged about that. But no, it's the real name. And I've had a lot of people wonder if that was a stage name or something like that. But no, it's the real McCoy. Real McCoy.
Bern, I've really enjoyed what we've had to discuss today, and I wanted to ask you quickly, if people have questions or they concerns, is there a way that they can get a hold of you and find out more information?
I'm glad you brought it up. As a matter of fact, anyone who is watching the show, if they'll call in 800 number 661-3490. That's 1-800-661-3490, or write to us at 1731 Howe Avenue. And that's suite number 321, okay, in Sacramento. And I'm going to take the liberty of doing Sacto here. And that's 958, I believe, 25, okay? But if they'll call or write to us, we'll send them a cassette, an audio cassette of this show, and address any question, any consideration, any challenge they might like to offer. And I enjoy hearing from anyone and everyone. And so they got to call or write. Once again, it's 1-800-661-3490 and 1731 Howe Avenue, number 321 in Sacramento. And we'll be glad to communicate with them and thank them for their attention.
That's great, because I'm sure the people who have some questions they'd like to ask you.
Oh, it'll come.
That's great.
Yeah, it'll come. We encourage that. I do. Is there anything that we can cover to wrap up here?
Well, I'm really looking forward to getting into many topics with you in further detail, and so I'm sure we have some guests who would like to tune in next time and take some more of your wonderful topics and tear them apart. And
oh, I'd love to be challenged too, and have them kind of delve into these issues, because most of my things are pretty well scripted. They're pretty defined, and yet I enjoy venturing out and expanding and examining all of that material. And I have no investment in being right. No investment in being right. All I know is that what we are teaching seems to have made a huge difference to a lot of people, and that's exciting. That's what's exciting. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to sign off, and this is kind of the thank you note. My name is Bern. And
Moses. Thank you, Bern.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.